You bear striking resemblance to this guy on the cover right here.
Do you know
Who's that dashing fella?
your long lost brother? So how did you first hear about the magazine?
I first heard about the magazine when I was working at KYCC. We would get the magazine at the office, and so that's how I sort of.
And this was what year?
Probably around 95 is my guess. I started working there in 94, so I'm assuming probably like late 94, probably early 95. I have some faint recollections of seeing it at UCLA, but I'm not sure. I'm not positive.
Michelle, how about you? How did you first hear about KoreAm?
I don't know how I first heard about it, but I first heard about the job on journalismjobs.com. I don't have a great story behind it, but I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I'm not Korean, but my
What's
last
your
name.
background?
I'm Chinese. My last name is it is Woo, W-O-O, so it could be either. So I think that's what got me the interview.
How about you, Julie?
I actually started receiving the KoreAm, it wasn't a magazine then, in my mailbox at UCLA dormitory. So I think from probably the first issue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, why am I getting this all of a sudden? But it was free.
Were some of your peers receiving it as well?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think I wasn't hanging out a lot with a lot of Korean Americans, to be honest, at that time. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't really have like a strong recollection of specific stories I read, but I do remember being surprised I saw it in my mailbox and thinking, oh, it's sort of cool.
Yeah. That's great. And then you, Ken?
My mom was very active in the Korean community, so she was subscribing, and so I would just see it around the house. And so this was mid '90s, and I just took an interest to it. At the time, it was just still a newspaper.
Really cool. So I was gonna ask you guys, what were some of your most memorable cover stories, cover issues? The ones that really kind of stuck with you. And feel free, anyone can just jump in. You don't have to go around in a circle.
Well, I'll jump in. We did the 10-year anniversary of the LA riots. That was a pretty memorable issue, at least for myself. I think it was for Julie as well. Putting that one together, that was pretty daunting. I think we tried to tackle more than we probably should have, and I think for the most part we succeeded. But we really tried to take a look at the rise in a sort of what's the right word? Comprehensive, kind of in a historically comprehensive kind of way. And I think that the end result turned out to be very satisfying, at least for myself.
And how long was that issue in the works?
Kind of the usual, 2 weeks.
It felt like longer.
It probably, I'm sure
I
it
think we
was.
started talking about it earlier.
I'm sure we started talking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it came together pretty quickly, dramatically, as is our wont.
And that's interesting because kind of the history of this publication kind of grew out of that, era.
Right. Well, no, the riots was a very
Yeah.
sort of defining moment, I guess, for KoreAm, especially for the community, but specifically for KoreAm, it was, right there at its infancy, so sort of kind of grew up with it.
Sure.
Yeah, because KoreAm formed in 1990, and just 2 years later,
Right.
was the LA riots.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, in a way, that sort of underscored the whole purpose of KoreAm, to have like a voice for Korean Americans in the media, and it's in English, so anyone in the public can read it. And I think that was, when you think back to the LA riots, one of the big issues was a lot of Korean immigrants especially felt like they had no voice in the mainstream media, and they were being totally misrepresented, underrepresented. You remember?
Yeah. scapegoated.
Scapegoating,
Yeah.
gun-toting Koreans,
Yeah.
guarding their stores at any cost, and not really being humanized. And there weren't like all these bilingual reporters at mainstream newspapers and TV stations. So I think that's when a lot of Korean Americans felt like, wow, we have no voice. KoreAm, I'm glad KoreAm was there. I think it didn't have as strong a presence back
Right.
then.
Yeah. Well, it was
Because
still
Right.
newsprint at that time.
But I think that's why what was neat about the 10-year anniversary issue is that a lot of Korean Americans who were second generation, like Jimmy and myself, like we're sort of old enough, we're grown-ups, and we could now sort of talk about the riots and distill that experience for everyone else like 10 years out. So
Right.
I agree with Jim, that was a really special issue.
Any other particularly memorable cover issues or stories that you've worked on over the years? Yeah.
For me, that would be the cover story we did on the North Korea famine. At the time, it felt like in the Korean community it wasn't really something that was being discussed, and at the time in the global community it was known as the silent famine because it was largely being ignored. So what I discovered was that a lot of first generation Koreans still had very much of a Cold War mentality, in which they refused to sort of see past the politics and into just seeing the human suffering that was going on there. And also on that note, there was so much information that was being blocked, so that it's kind of understandable that people weren't that it wasn't at the forefront of people's minds at the time. So and what was just gratifying about it was that at the time it was just me and James essentially running the magazine, and for two guys in a warehouse to make a cover story out of just very little means was a very it was very satisfying to put that up and then get a lot of congratulatory letters from people in the community. So
Great.
That was the infamous phone call issue.
yeah,
too,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the infamous phone call.
Yeah, there's
Can
there's a
we
story
elaborate on
there.
that a little? You want to go?
Sorry,
into
the story. It's
Tell
not
us.
too tired. Okay,
No,
I'm just gonna pretend like you guys aren't here because they've heard it
Yeah.
Yes.
over and over.
Yeah.
So basically, as I was saying, it felt like it was just me and James working out of a warehouse trying to put this, important global issue together, or global subject together on this, on the magazine. And so, I had managed to get a phone number of human rights workers who were in North Korea. One was a Canadian and the other was an American. And they were working in Pyongyang, like doing food distribution, and I was able to just call them from here in Gardena, California, to Pyongyang, North Korea, and
At the phone.
and just
Yeah.
conducted like a 2 or 3 hour interview collectively that amount of time, and I didn't, it felt like I was calling the moon from planet Earth to the moon in terms of just the having that accessibility.
Yeah.
So I kind of forgot about it, and then about 2 months later, we're in the office, and James is like, "Ken!" He was looking at the phone bill that had arrived. So,
What was the phone bill? Do you remember?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like $2 per minute. So it was pretty bad. It was in the thousands. Yeah.
Suffice to say, anytime we gotta make a international phone call, we have to run it by James first. Is that right?
This was before Skype.
Yes,
Yeah.
before Skype. Or free
I
internet
was going
calls.
to say, for me, this one here stands out. So this is May 2007. It's all about Virginia Tech. The cover is Our Country, Our Tragedy, the Virginia Tech massacre. And I remember it was about a week before we were going to print. We had our cover story all laid out. It was a cover story on Sonia Thomas, a competitive eater. She's holding, 2 hot dogs, and that was like this fun, sort of a very lighthearted cover. And then right, just, I think it was maybe less than a week before we were going to go to print to the printers, there was this tragedy at Virginia Tech. And so I remember, well, I was a staff writer at the time, and Karina Knoll was the editor, and so we had this conversation, this meeting, everyone sat down and talked about, what are we going to do to cover this, and we just decided to, scratch all of our coverage and go full force with this. We wrote about, the community response in Virginia, the Korean American community's response here, and just the Korean community felt this tragedy so deeply that as the shooter was, as we all know, the name Sung Hee Cho, I don't think anyone could ever forget, that name or that photograph. And just talking to students, even here in LA, saying that their parents are telling them don't wear anything with a Korean flag, like don't have a pin on your backpack that has a Korean flag, because you're gonna get, there's so much hatred out there right now, and we just really talked about how I remember Margaret Cho in her stand-up, she was saying something like, when we heard that the shooter was Asian, everyone was like, please don't let him be Korean, please don't let him be Korean, and I guess her whole joke was not only was he Korean, but his last name was Cho. But just after after covering all of this, I think the community really appreciated that standpoint, and
after the incident, I think there was kind of a lot of introspection and sort of self-reflection within the community, and certainly, this cover story, I'm sure, helped kind of generate a lot of that.
Yeah, just we explored the whole thing where Koreans apologized. Do you guys remember that?
Korean government, right?
Government
Yeah.
apologized for this incident, and it's just like, if it was a white man shooter, like the president wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's partly because Cho, he was technically a South Korean citizen, right? Even though he lived and grown up in the U.S., he was not a U.S. citizen, he was a Korean citizen. And so there was this whole controversy even among Korean Americans about, like, why did the South Korean government feel the need to apologize? You know, this Cho was a Korean, he was an American, really, even though he was born in Korea. And he like identified with the Columbine killers, right?
Right.
And a lot of things like that. So I think I remember people being worried that there might be anti-Asian hate crimes, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was a big fear. And so I remember like being really happy about this issue because it was sort of like very proactively sort of getting on top of that current issue, and then covering it from a point of view that I hadn't seen in the mainstream, which was, even like Cho Sung Hee, he was called Cho Sung Hee for the longest time, his last name first and then his first name, which made him seem even more foreign versus American. And it was almost like, America, do you not want to embrace this killer as one of your own, but yeah, those types of issues are the kinds of things that were covered, and so I thought it was like really, really valuable.
I think sort of on the flip side though, so to be on the more, the one issue that I'm sort of proud of is our 2002 World Cup story. That one really sort of, that was the year that South Korea hosted with Japan, and there was just all this sort of excitement within the Korean American community. And what sucked for us here in the West Coast was that a lot of the games were at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So we had to but there was all these sort of like big events going on to watch the games, and so we were there covering it, and it got to be quite the hazard to our sleeping health, but but to sort of kind of see how the Korean American community kind of rallied or got excited and brought kind of people together all over the World Cup. That was a lot of fun. So
wasn't that another case where we scrapped the original cover story?
And
then
did we? I don't.
I think I can't remember what the cover story was supposed to be, but it was sort of like
Yeah.
We didn't have
could've-
much time, and it was like, we decided to change.
We decided to make
Yeah.
the cover
Is there
story.
other instances where you guys had to scrap the cover at the last minute? I can think of one. No, I'm just kidding. I can think of almost one, but no, that's nowhere near along those lines.
We did a 9/11 focused issue after 9/11. Trying to think what other.
And what was sort of the kind of Korean American approach to
That-
that story?
That one,
issue?
you know, there was a big debate within the office as to, you know, whether or not we should make it the cover story. My initial thought was, I don't think we should make 9/11 be a Korean American issue. It's just an American issue to sort of like, kind of, I don't know, like, what make it Korean American just didn't seem right to me. But, you know,
Yeah.
we had other voices in the office, and ultimately we decided to, you know, I think try to make it show that, you know, Korean Americans are just sort of part of the fabric of, you know, American society, and just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
illustrate
that makes a lot of sense. So, do you, switching gears a little bit, do any of you recall any, I guess, bizarre moments that you've had to deal with, or particularly challenging moments you had to deal with as an editor here?
Oh, there were
Or
plenty of bizarre moments.
chuckling,
There are plenty of bizarre moments.
Can you
It-
talk about them?
I think one. While I was editor, I think KoreAm sort of we went through a sort of kind of growth phase, because it was Ken before me, and it was just sort of Ken, and James, and then once I got here, we were able to, you know, devote a little more resources, and had an extra writer. We actually had a photographer on staff, and so once we have like those kind of elements in place, we got to do a little bit more things, and I like to say we sort of experimented. You know, we went to a Korean bathhouse and took photos in a bathhouse. You know, there's some bizarre moments in there.
In the name of journalism.
Yeah, exactly. Strictly in the name of just, you know, I got to see my coworkers naked. You know, it was strictly in the pursuit of.
We did block out certain
Yeah.
areas and
Yeah.
photos in the
Thank
magazine.
you.
Magazine.
Yeah. We won't tell you who those people are. We don't want to tell you who those people are. But
Striking resemblance to Jimmy and
Hey,
James.
no.
Here's
And a named third person.
Here's one quick story. I mean, one thing that I found really bizarre was that there was a little bit of rivalry going on between other, I'll leave all the names out, but you know, there was another Korean publication that was in competition with us, and I personally never even thought of them as, you know, that there, you know, I thought we needed to all work together and, you know, keep things friendly. And anyway, so there was one journalist convention in Seattle that, you know, everyone in the community went to, and I saw this. I saw a well-known, or a high-profile reporter who was there, who supports that other publication, or who was supporting that other publication. And we're all sitting together in a restaurant at a table, and I guess we were going around talking about our struggles or whatever as reporters. And so I was talking about how KoreAm, you know, it's a shoestring operation, and we're just trying to get by. And that person just very crudely turned to me and said, "You think you're the only one?" And I was like, "Whoa!" It was. I thought it was so uncalled for. And then from then on, I just never forgot that person said that, and I thought it was really crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's. I think it was just a very unusual situation, and it's not the norm. It was just the word bizarre
Yeah.
sparked that memory.
Because in a way, there's just so few of publications, you
Yeah.
know, like us, like this, that you know you would expect more support.
Yeah.
What about some of the most bizarre pitches you've received as editors from outside contributors that wanted to write, perhaps for the journal, and maybe kind of was a little off base in terms of what they wanted to write. I guess I'm asking how open you were to whatever ideas people brought to the table.
Oh, okay, I've got one. This guy who used to help out at the magazine, he was so obsessed with ear pickers to clean the earwax out of your ear.
Right.
And I said, you know, I totally get it, but if you're going to do this story, it's got to be funny. You can't do a very hard-hitting, serious story about ear picks. And he got really upset, and he did the story after I left. And I got into the magazine.
Yeah, I read it. I read it. But I like to think that we did it in sort of, we did. I never saw his original story. It became more of a.
Redid it,
Yeah,
right?
we redid it. It made
It's
it
more
more
of a humorous,
a fun kind
yeah.
of the different kind of ear pickers.
Okay.
Because
And-
Koreans tend to
Yeah,
invent some really interesting
they are kind of innovative when it comes to certain personal hygiene products. So, you know, we had some fun with it.
I think I should have given him more feedback or more suggestions of how to do it, like in a more, like from a cultural perspective, because he was just like, "There's this new device," and it's like, whatever.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
see, the pain again. It's like right here. 15 years later, the suffering, the harm.
Might as well be an ear thing.
So over the years, as you can see, the publication's really evolved, and each era, I think, when you guys led the magazine, featured some of these unique sections. I can think of a few. There were some columns that have seen their rotations. There were some interesting, just unique sections. Do you want to talk a little bit about what sections you liked and like My Name Is, for instance, or some of the ones that you had when you were leading the magazine, and how you kind of came up with that idea?
Well, the My Name Is, there was just sort of the sudden, we got introduced to all these guys with weird, names that were usually based off of their Korean immigrant parents not being able to spell the original intent name right.
Find those people,
Uh,
their profiles.
Well, the first one actually worked for us, so that's kind of how it started, and then from there, once that idea kind of, it pops a bulb or whatever, and so that was,
Some example names.
well, so the first one was Charles.
Charles.
It's supposed to be Charles. We had a Bibian. It was supposed to be Vivian, but it was with the B.
Okay.
It's that very stereotypical BV,
Yeah.
mix-up kind of stuff. So, and then it started to lose its focus. It became a little bit more just kind of weird, unusual names. But that was just sort of. I like to think we would see something that was kind of interesting, that was kind of unique to, I guess, Korean Americans, and we just kind of ran with it.
Yeah.
So.
Other sections that pop into your minds from others that kind of, you thought was kind of unusual or innovative?
You guys remember Volkwins?
Yes,
Wouldn't call that
Very-
innovative.
very much so. Oh.
You know what? I think that was a leftover from my tenure.
And this is when
But the
But
thing is,
no, no,
people loved
People
it.
loved it.
People
People
loved
loved
it.
it.
Yeah.
Totally
Is that
loved
right?
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
people loved it.
People still talk about it and
Really?
they miss it.
Yeah.
So
I think, was there like some sort of partnership? Like we got some sort
Yeah,
of
you
it
got
was
to deal with some
Korean
book.
Cultural Center or something.
Yeah.
Maybe, like if we did a cultural thing, then we'd run an ad or something. Maybe-
I think
We
you're.
need to kill the camera for
you
this.
mean compromise?
I think you
has to
got
be
to deal with like a
mistaken.
book, an actual Korean folk tales
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
where we could just run the story.
I think generally some Korean ministry or whatever said, as long as you do some kind of cultural thing, we'll spend money. Because but yeah,
There
that
was a
started.
There
There was a book.
There was
Yeah,
a book, but
a
that
Holland book. That's the publisher.
that could be
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that red and white, red trim
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
border. Yeah. I don't know.
So people wrote letters, huh?
It's kind of nice. I mean, it's like, you'll read about these celebrities in other magazines and newspapers, but where else are you going to
Right.
read a Korean fable?
True.
A little taste of culture and
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Nice.
Speaking of feedback, yeah, you get a lot of letters and you hear back from readers. What's the most, I guess, what's the most memorable feedback you've ever gotten from a reader? Angry or positive or all of the above? Let's see.
Well, one thing I remember was, back in the day when we actually still got letters instead of it was all being email, Facebook post, whatever it was. We started the section on Korean Americans going to jail, and that sort of started this debate of like, why are you highlighting these people who are going to jail kind of stuff? And then the people go, we need to know about. And people would write a response to that letter saying, hey, it's.
So you're writing stories about Korean?
It was like just sort of like
series.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we did some big feature stories about
Incarcerated
incarceration,
Koreans.
but then we would just kind of do like these sort of little. It became a section.
Yeah.
Oh, the crime blog.
Yeah,
Oh, I see. Okay.
just, we would highlight someone going to jail or accused of something, and and then that seemed to spark this kind of this whole. It's the idea of the model minority. Why are you deliberately just trying to subvert the model minority by pointing out that there's bad people? And
But you continued with the series in
for a little
these
while,
letters?
we did for a little while.
I feel like that always came up even when, with our website, whenever there was a story about a Korean American who committed a crime, people were like, why are you writing about these types of stories? It's like you proactively seek them out or something like that. And it's almost like they felt like ethnic press, we shouldn't talk about the negative, that we exist only to talk about the positive stories in our community. And we've always felt like that wasn't
Right.
true. It was really, no, it's because we want holistic, balanced representation, in our full human context, not just the positive stories, and the
Exactly.
success stories. But I noticed that it's been consistent even from, early 2000s, and even today we still get some of those letters on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nowadays, we know that the internet is really kind of taken over our sort of publishing medium. Can you talk a little bit about when you were editors, how much of a web presence, digital presence, KoreAm had, if any?
Ken?
I was there when we launched our first website, so that was exciting. I think we just had subscription information and that was it, and who we are, our phone number.
Did you even have internet connection?
Oh yeah, we had a 56K dial-up.
Yeah, AOL. We had an AOL account.
But we actually had it professionally done, which was really nice. So it really looked good. But yeah, I don't recall that we ever put story. That was too advanced for us at the time.
I think when I came on, we just started to putting up. It was just the print edition was going online like a month after, so we weren't any sort of innovators when it comes to online publishing. And I have to admit, I think at least for when I was there, it was nice not having to think about that. We could just focus on getting stories done for the magazine, and that was it. And that was just really sort of, I would even call it afterthought. It was like a afterthought. So yeah, luckily I didn't have to be burdened with that as well.
And in some ways, when KoreAm went online, our readership really was able to kind of expand to other places where you perhaps didn't know we even had readers, right? Internationally or across the country. So
I was here when we launched our first blog. So content, web-only content. That was something new. And I think in the early days of that, maybe 2008-9-ish, we tried there were a lot of bugs and there was a lot of too much traffic would crash the site, a lot of that. But we also tried a lot of new things. Like we would have live webcasts here, right here, like where we're sitting,
Yeah.
where we invite musicians like David Choi or Priscilla Ahn to come in and just give like live concerts
Wow.
right here. And it is really neat. Like, I don't know, actually the acoustics here are really awesome. So
Yeah.
it's like being here.
What a great space.
So we better sound good.
A private show was, actually a pretty cool thing. People could, watch and chat all over. We had Far East movement. So that's exciting.
There's definitely been a lot of new ideas brought to the table throughout the years, and I mean I didn't even know about the webcast series
Yeah. I
before
think,
they were big, huh?
right. It's somewhat short-lived, but it's pretty cool at the time.
Was it because there just weren't enough people to do them?
I don't know, just things come and go. Yeah.
Michelle left. That's
Yeah.
all that cool stuff. Okay.
So on the issue of sort of kind of more entertainment, I know a lot of Korean Americans today are kind of really, there's a lot more exposure in the acting and entertainment spheres. Do you recall any individuals, particularly who you knew, who we were writing about before they really kind of made it big time? And without embarrassing anyone here, of course, can we share anything that you recall about the first time meeting such a person, or what they were just like back then? I mean, you guys probably know more because you're, had more exposure or experience writing about them. Or we can give them pseudonyms. No, that wouldn't be fun, would it? No.
A fun thing for that we did was we did a big cover story on Better Luck Tomorrow when that movie was coming out, and we did this whole big photo shoot with Justin Lin, the director, and all the actors, and I gotta admit, we had the photographer at the time, and we did it at this place called Okie Dog, this sort of hot dog hamburger stand in Hollywood.
Okay.
Just that sort of energy that went into producing those photos and that story, I thought was, I guess I would never have guessed that from that, moment, Justin Lin would become this huge,
Sure. And
studio
the Korean
director.
American actors in that film.
Exactly,
as well.
John Cho, Song Kang. So that was pretty memorable.
That was one of the first, earliest ensemble Asian American casts I can remember too.
Oh yeah,
That movie, and it kind of really blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else who would recall, or?
I have dirt, but I don't
Let's hear it. Come on.
That is.
I don't want to.
Can we turn off the camera?
I don't want to seem like a negative guy, like all the negative.
That's a positive story.
I know So let's skip it.
Do you guys want to take a break?
Yeah, that's a good.
John?